For the past several years, Warhammer 2 has expanded with numerous DLCs, some more enjoyable than others. But with Warhammer 3 coming later this year, Warhammer 2's life cycle is coming to an end. Before it's put to bed though, we will see one more Lord Pack for Game 2. For the past few months, it has been assumed that the Lord Pack would be the Beastmen fighting against the Dark Elves in the cold wastes of Naggarond. However, Rakarth's surprising release in mid-March has opened up the possibilities of other races fending off the Beastmen hordes. In the previous video in this series, we explored the options for the Lizardmen, should they find themselves included in Warhammer 2's last hurrah. Today, we shift our focus to the deserts of Nehekahara, and the different Lord options which the Tomb Kings have available. We look at their lore, potential mechanics, and units that could be added to the game if the Tomb Kings rise from their slumber in the final Lord Pack. So, which of our mummified friends is yet to make an appearance in the game? We have the cursed Scarab Lord, Prince Apophas, who murdered the entire royal line of Nomads so he could proclaim himself the rightful ruler. This did not go to plan for Apophas, as he was quickly apprehended and dragged to the temple for judgment. For his crimes, he was entombed alive in a sarcophagus, though he was not alone, as the priests had filled this tomb with hundreds of flesh-eating scarabs. His screams, as the scarabs consumed him, could be heard beyond the temple walls, a rather gruesome demise for the prince. The god of the underworld, Usurian, claimed Apophas' soul as he passed from the mortal realm, though the young prince somehow managed to strike a bargain for his release. He would serve Usurian until he was able to claim a soul that perfectly matched his own. Apophas now takes the form of a swarm of scarabs, rising up from the desert sands. His skull, devoid of all flesh and muscle, can be seen atop this mass of beetles. He searches the lands of Nehekahara for the one soul that can fulfill his pact and release him from his torment to return to his mortal form. To beat Apophas in combat is beyond the skills of even the most well-trained and disciplined of warriors. His form shifts as his enemy strikes at him, and any wounds are regenerated by the swarm of scarabs. He is utterly implacable and will not stop until his foe lies dead at his hand. When the deed is done and his foe's soul is captured by Apophas, he returns to the underworld to take measure of his prize. The soul is compared with Apophas' own on a pair of golden scales, to see if his debt has been fulfilled. To this day, no soul offered has been equal, and Apophas continues to roam the lands. Apophas would certainly make for a unique experience among the Tomb King lords, as his focus is not on the restoration of their empire, but the acquisition of the one soul that would set him free. As such, we could see Apophas implemented as a horde faction, not tied to any specific location, and free to hunt souls across the old world and beyond. Another option from the 8th edition army book is Ramhotep the Visionary, the greatest necrotect of ancient Nehekahara. In life, Ramhotep kept his accomplishments quiet, for upon completion of their works, great artisans were expected to commit ritual suicide. Ramhotep disagreed with this tradition, and instead acted as an assistant, allowing others to take the credit for his designs. This allowed him to work on many a project during his mortal life. In his later years, Ramhotep realized that there was still so much more to accomplish, and his vision reached far beyond his mortal lifespan. It was at this time that he decided to accept the honor of mummification, for only then would he be able to one day continue his work. Upon completion of a great monument for the king of Quatar, Ramhotep fashioned himself a death mask and prepared for his internment. Over the passing centuries, few of Ramhotep's works remained unscathed, be it from the weather, the shifting sands, or from looters. Upon his awakening he was horrified, and set about restoring his works to their former glory. His skill in undeath was as great as it was in life, if not more so, and his many carvings would once again stride into battle at his command. Ramhotep now works relentlessly to restore and maintain his masterpieces, and with his army of constructs, he takes revenge upon those who defiled his works during his long slumber. If added to the game, Ramhotep could bring a lord focused on constructs, and would be the perfect time for creative assembly to include the Khemric Titan from the Monstrous Arcanum. His campaign could be focused on rebuilding the glory of ancient Nekahara, with a focus on restoring those monuments that he built during his mortal life. Our next lord option is Tutankhanut, a young prince of Nomads who is a master bowman and charioteer who was slain while hunting lions. It was not his prey that killed him, however, but the spear of a savage tribesman who attacked him when he was separated from his hunting party. Prince Tutankhanut was mummified and buried in a lavish ceremony by his grieving father, and the loss of the young prince was considered a great tragedy. Many centuries later, when Tutankhanut awoke from his deathly slumber to a skeletal form withered and decrepit, he was horrified, and he ordered that a body of gold be fashioned for him, as the ancient beliefs foretold. Prince Tutankhanut now rules over Nomads, as was his birthright, controlling the fates of the living and the undead, which live in an uncommon harmony. His mortal subjects see him as the embodiment of their god, and dedicate themselves to the protection of Nomads and their deity. Prince Tutankhanut could be implemented in much the same way as Arkhan the Black, but instead of a mixture of two undead factions, we would have a mixture of the undead and the living. His addition, along with his mortal servants, could be the closest we get to seeing some of the units of Araby. Finally, we have Sehenesmet, the Vizier of Quatar, who has spent centuries maintaining the colossal statues that were created to represent the ancient Nakaharan gods. He is so skilled that its incantations allow him to control many constructs simultaneously. He was responsible for the incantations of awakening, which were unleashed upon the monoliths at the entrance to the famed Valley of the Kings, and they now roam the lands of Araby. Unhappy with his immortal form, he took it upon himself to transfer his spirit into that of a giant construct, so that he could gain the strength to undertake more ambitious projects. If we see Sehenesmet added to the game, he would fill a similar role to that of Ramhotep, so it might be that Sehenesmet would find himself added as a legendary hero. So there we have some possible lords. So what units could we see added alongside them? First, there are the Tomb King's equivalent of warhounds, the Bastethi. In ancient Nekahara, kings would keep large cats as house pets, but they would also serve the purpose of guarding their homes and even joining them on hunts. When a king died, these cats were also entombed to guard their master in the afterlife. They are extremely fast, able to outpace almost anything on the battlefield, and as such would be perfectly suited for dealing with war machines and skirmishers. They would, however, struggle in combat with well-armoured foes or those with high defensive stats. The Bastethi would also come in a larger variant, stronger, tougher, and able to tear through armour. These felines were the guardians of the Nekaharan temples and were highly revered. These beasts are also full of necromantic energies, buffing other undead units around them, and even being able to reanimate the dead. These will give the Tomb Kings a nice alternative to the vultures for hunting down those annoying artillery pieces. The Tomb Kings currently have a number of ranged options, from the humble skeleton archer to the higher tier ranged Ushabti and bone giants. However, I think they could do with a mid-tier edition of armoured skeleton archers, which have a higher damage output and increased range, possibly with armour-piercing missiles. These could be based on the stats of the Nakaharan warriors. Another option, which would be very simple to implement, would be Ushabti with great weapons, to give the Tomb Kings another anti-large unit on the battlefield. They would have increased armour-piercing damage and bonus versus large, but would lose some of their melee defense. A fantastic construct the Tomb Kings have is the Bone Giant, and an option is to have this added in a melee variant. I'm not sure this is needed though, as the other constructs already fill that role, and nothing would really be gained, but it's still something to keep in mind. A possible addition to the Tomb King's limited artillery is the Bone Thrower or Bone Ballista. This is simply the Tomb King's version of the Dwarves' Bolt Thrower, and would be an armor-piercing missile that can penetrate multiple ranks. There would be a nice complementary unit for the existing Screaming Skull Catapult and Casket of Souls. A unit from the 4th edition Undead Army book is the Carrion Wraith Riders. These ghostly apparitions ride large carrion beasts into battle and are an excellent unit for harassing wizards and smaller flying units. The riders will carry scythes and will cause armor-piercing magical damage. They had an interesting special rule on the tabletop, where the rider would get 1 extra attack for every wound caused by the carrion. While I am uncertain how this could be represented in game, I think they would give the Tomb Kings a much needed boost in the air. The big ticket item for the Tomb Kings would be the Khemric Titan, among the most feared of constructs that lie beneath the sands of Nakahara. These giant arcane constructs tower above the largest necrosphinx and are animated by the mightiest of magical enchantments. It's unknown how many of these mighty constructs were created in ancient times, and many have likely not survived through the ages. On the tabletop, they are unbreakable, cause terror, always strike last, and can fly, something that seems out of place for such a large beast. In addition, it comes with several special abilities. The Shrine of Eternities allows the model to unleash a banned spell once per magic phase. The available spells are Gaze of Dust, which is a magic missile, the Wrath of the Sands, which is a hex where enemies suffer -2 to hit, and Reawakening of Ancient Might, which is an augment for the Titan itself that restores 1 wound. These could all easily be adapted for the game and added as unit abilities which do not draw from the winds of magic. Another special ability is Curse of the Fallen. If the Khemric Titan is slain, then it shatters into pieces. Any model caught in the blast area is slain if the player rolls a 6. This again would be easily adapted to the game, with anything caught in the blast zone taking magical damage. The Titan has several special attacks at its disposal. Reaping Blades sees massive scythes lash out from its forelimbs, cutting anything in the area down. Flesh-eating Scarabs sees a swarm of scarabs surge forth from its jaws to consume anyone in their path. And Devouring Jaws sees the enemy being consumed whole and crushed by its massive jaws. Another, Soul-Slaying Hunger, opens up a howling gate which sucks in the souls of surrounding enemies. These provide the Titan with a lot of options on the battlefield to decimate its enemies, and would make the Khemric Titan a fantastic addition to the game. Additional options which would make sense for Prince Tutankhanut would be units of Nomads. Camel riders with rifles would make for an excellent addition and provide something unique for that Tomb King faction. Nomadic warriors that fight with dual swords, or come equipped with rifles on foot, would also help make Tutankhanut's faction a different experience on the battlefield. So there are some likely units. How about mechanics? What could we see implemented for each of the legendary lords? Prince Apophas is all about finding that one soul that can release him from his torment. So a mechanic where he can capture a hero or lord once per battle, much like Altharion's Cage, and draw the soul from them would be a lawful addition. The prince would be able to store a limited number of souls, which can be spent on upgrades for himself and for other lords and heroes in his faction. The number of souls that can be contained could be increased through technologies or character skills, so the higher cost abilities could be purchased. At first, Apophas would be unable to harvest the souls of legendary lords or immortal lords and heroes, but as he gains power through the campaign, he would be able to take the souls of greater characters. The souls captured would be displayed on the main toolbar and could be spent in a system similar in form to the greenskin scrap mechanic, but there would be the option of applying multiple abilities at the same time. Ramhotep would have a mechanic where he gathers resources from regions across the map to create his most ambitious masterpiece, a grand Heirotitan that stands 1.5 times taller than any other, called the Grand Heirotitan of Quatar. This grand construct would come with increased resistances, melee attack, melee defense, and bonuses versus infantry, along with some special abilities that can be unlocked as the campaign progresses. The canopic jars and marble gathered would be displayed in a new user interface, where the pieces of the Grand Heirotitan are combined to unlock the Heirotitan in the player's Regiments of Renown list. The interface would require the player to spend the resources on technologies that would grant pieces of the construct or grant bonuses or new combat abilities to the standard constructs available. The player would also have access to a mechanic where the Grand Heirotitan of Quatar and all other Heirotitans could be adapted based on what enemies the player is facing. This would adapt the existing greenskin scrap mechanic in much the same way it has been used for Dryads, where the player can change the loadout of the Heirotitans by spending marble and gold at any time. There would be a few different loadouts, with one being geared to fighting against large monsters, having increased weapon damage and bonus versus large. Another designed for fighting infantry, with increased melee attack and bonus versus infantry, and a heavily armoured version for prolonged engagements that has increased missile, magic, and physical resistances. For Prince Tutankhanut, we could have a system that revolves around the devotion of his mortal subjects. A new resource could be displayed on the campaign screen, which shows the devotion gained from temple buildings, empire expansion, high public order, and dilemmas. This devotion bar would have several set tiers, with the player gaining increased bonuses the more devotion Tutankhanut has. It would also be possible to lose devotion if the player loses settlements, has prolonged negative public order leading to uprisings, or sacrifices it in dilemmas for short-term bonuses. The loss of too much devotion may push the player to a lower tier and see their bonuses lost. Having your devotion be at the maximum level for a specified number of turns could even be defined as one of the victory conditions for Tutankhanut, in a similar fashion to that of Bretonnian's chivalry. Sehenesmet, being a master of incantations, could have a mechanic that revolves around the siphoning of magical power in battle to boost the abilities of his animation incantations and the stats and health of himself and his constructs. The power gained during a battle would remain with Sehenesmet for a few turns, slowly dissipating until another battle is fought and more magical energy can be siphoned. Between battles, the player would have the option to expend the remaining magical energies to weave permanent incantations, which provide various bonuses to his faction on the campaign. It would give the player a dilemma. Do they want more powerful constructs in battle, or are they willing to sacrifice those effects for bonuses on the campaign? It would certainly be a different experience that would tie the effects of the battle and the campaign closer together. Well, there we have several Tomb King lords with possible mechanics, along with some units that might be added to the game. How would you rate the chances of the Tomb Kings being included in the next DLC? Do you think they deserve the additional attention, or do you believe they were fully fleshed out in their campaign pack? If you enjoyed this look at the Masters of Nehekahara, please leave a like or comment, as it will help this video reach more viewers through YouTube's algorithm. As always, I would like to thank my patrons, whose continued support is very humbling. Supporting a small channel such as mine is very much appreciated. A special thanks goes out to Hot Apple Pie and to Cody Bonds. I'm Grey Tiger, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.